Well, over the last couple weeks, we have been trying to answer the question through the book of Ecclesiastes of this right here. What are you living for? What are you living for? It's the question that we have been trying to answer, and we've looked in a couple different places, in a couple different ways to try to find the answer to that question. What are you living for? Now, as I told you last week, we started talking to a select group of people in this room that were looking for meaning in life by their wisdom, by the stuff that they know, by their grade point average, by their success in school, and trying to find satisfaction, trying to find meaning in how smart I am, how successful I am, what school I'm going to go to one day, and what job I'm going to get. But ultimately, the Bible talks about, Ecclesiastes told us last week, that ultimately those pursuits without God are vanity, are a waste. So this week, we wanted to turn our attention to Ecclesiastes Chapter 2, a little section that we left out from last week, talking to a different group of people in this room, people that are trying to search for pleasure, trying to search for worldly pleasure. As you go to school, as you're surrounded by people that live different way than you do, and you look at them and you think, wow, that seems attractive to me. I want what they have. They have something that I don't have, and I want to try and find out to see if what they're doing, if it works, if it gives me satisfaction, if it gives me fulfillment, if it gives me pleasure and meaning in life. And as we're searching for meaning, as we're trying to answer this question, what are we living for? We can see tonight that if you live your life for worldly pleasures, you will be sorely disappointed in your findings. So I'd love for you guys to open up to Ecclesiastes Chapter 2 here with me. Ecclesiastes Chapter 2. I'm going to read verses 1 through 11 will be our text tonight. As the author of this book, as I've argued, Solomon, he's going to explain to us that he has tried to taste what the world offers, the pleasure that the world offers. And we're going to see that tonight, ultimately, this pursuit it leaves him completely empty. So Ecclesiastes Chapter 2, as we search for pleasure, as we try to answer this question, what are you living for? I know that some people in this room are living for this right here. So I'd plead with you to listen up, to understand, to take this text to heart, and to live differently because of it. Ecclesiastes Chapter 2, verse 1, Solomon writes, he says, I said in my heart, come now, and I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. But behold, this is also vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad. Of pleasure, what use is it? I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine. My heart still guided me with wisdom, and how to lay a hold on folly, till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. So I made great works. I built houses. I planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks, and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of the growing trees. I bought male servants and female servants, and had slaves who were born in my house. And I had great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. And I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasures of kings and princes. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of man. So I became great, and I surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. And also my wisdom remained with me. In whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure. For my heart found pleasure in all of my toil, and this was my reward for all of my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil that I had expended in doing it, and behold, all was vanity, a striving after the wind. There was nothing to be gained under the sun. See here, the last couple of weeks, we've learned about this word vanity, this word hevel, this Hebrew word hevel, which means vapor or breath or emptiness. And ultimately what he says in these 11 verses here is he tried to taste the pleasures of this world, and he said they were nothing. So the answer to that question, what is life? What am I doing? What am I trying to get out of life? The pleasure, the meaning that I'm trying to find in life. I know that when some of you guys go to school and you look at the way that your friends, the world is living, and you say, that looks attractive. They have something that I don't have. They have no restraint on their life. They can do whatever they want. They can, as the author says here, they can keep no pleasure. Or they can whatever their eyes desire, they do not stop themselves from experiencing. And you look at that and you say, man, that looks easy. That looks good. That looks like it would give me pleasure and satisfaction and fulfillment. I know that is a very real, a very present temptation for many of you as you go to school, as you look at the way the world's living. You say, man, that looks pretty good. What the author tells us here is what they are doing, what the world does, and ultimately what he has tried. He tried it before you, he tried it before me, and he said, after I got everything that I wanted, I realized it was empty and it was nothing. Ultimately, as you go to school, as you look at the way the world lives, it's very, very important for you, if you're going to live a life that is pleasing to God, that you stop fantasizing about the world's pleasures. I'd love for you to write it down the way for point number 1. Stop fantasizing about the world's pleasures. Stop fantasizing about the world's pleasures. I know when some of you read this text and you read all this stuff that he got to have, all this pleasure, all this fulfillment, this satisfaction that he got to have, this self-indulgent life, you think, man, that looks kind of good. That looks like they've got it made. They can do whatever they want to do. Seemingly, there's no consequences. Maybe you've tried to taste and to nibble on little pleasures of the world just to see how they taste. I know I'm not supposed to, but I'm going to anyway. I'm just going to try out what the world has because it looks good. But ultimately, what this text is here warning you and warning me tonight of is that you could have whatever you want and it would still leave you empty. Look back at verse number 1. He says, I said in my heart, so now he's making this decision, and he says, come now, he's talking to himself, I will test you with pleasure, enjoy yourself. Basically what he tells himself here is, go after everything that you want. And that sounds like a crazy statement. Maybe you've thought that statement before. Man, I wonder what my life would be like if I could do whatever I wanted. Test my heart with pleasure, and those 2 words there, I just enjoy myself. Look what he says. He said, but behold, this was also vanity. He tried it before you, and he tried the world in its fullness. When you try to snack or to nibble on the things that the world has, you are just trying a little taste. Solomon here, we're going to break it down in everything that he had absolutely everything. If you look back at verse number 10, you drop your eyes down to verse 10, he says, whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all of my toil. Everything that he wanted. Right now, as you think about what your life would be like with no restraint, you can sin, you can go after pleasure as much as you want. You think, wow, that sounds good. I want you to see the danger of fantasizing that. Because ultimately what you're doing is you're putting your mind, your attention on something, one, that you can never have, and 2, something that will lead you to utter emptiness and nothingness and vanity. Our word, vapor, a mist, meaninglessness. I don't know if you guys have seen this. I do not have TikTok for the record, but I know that this is a TikTok trend. I've seen it in other places. But there's this TikTok trend of cooking chicken in NyQuil. Have you heard of this before? It's a thing. It's a thing. On TikTok, people will cook some, I think most of the time it's chicken, and they will cook it in NyQuil and then eat it. Okay, so just one of the stupidest things you can think of in this world. This has gotten so serious, and so many people have gone to the ER because of doing this. Because the FDA, the Food Drug Agency, or I don't even know, FDA, whatever. You know what the FDA is. They had to put out a warning, do not cook chicken in NyQuil. Like, they literally had to say that in one of their press releases. Don't cook chicken with NyQuil anymore. Because basically what they said happens is when you start frying or cooking your chicken in this NyQuil, all of the cough syrup medicine and the alcohol that's in there, because it's hotter, it's fuming up into these people's faces, and they're basically getting high off of sitting there cooking chicken and then eating the chicken. All of the substance that's in there is even more potent than normal NyQuil when you just eat or drink NyQuil when you're sick or something like that. And so you see this trend right here, and unless you're really stupid, you think, I'm not going to do that, right? Is anyone here going to go home and try NyQuil chicken? I hope not. I hope not. Because you look at this and you think that sounds like one of the dumbest things that anyone could ever do is cook their chicken in NyQuil. Sending people to the ER. People are getting super sick because of this right here. No one in this room is tempted to do that because you see how ridiculous it is. You see that ultimately it doesn't take a smart person to understand this is not a wise idea. It will cause me sickness. It will cause me harm. And I might have to go to the hospital if I do something like this. You see, obviously, that it's a waste. You see, obviously, that you shouldn't do it. And so none of you are going to go home and try this trend, I'm sure. A couple years ago when Tide Pods, the Tide Pod challenge, people were eating Tide Pods. I don't think any of you were tempted to eat Tide because you're like, that's ridiculous. It's very obvious of how much of a waste this is. But here's the thing. You go to school, you go into the world, and you think it is a good idea. And what Ecclesiastes here is telling us is that really what the world has to offer is you cooking your chicken in NyQuil. It's very clear. Everyone in this room understands how ridiculous this is. But you become so accustomed to the world that when you go to school, it's like, well, yeah, I know I shouldn't, but it's not that bad. I don't know. Like I've seen people do it and they've not gone to the ER and they've, done this or that. You don't look at something like this and think, I want to try it because you see how obvious it is. But Ecclesiastes Chapter 2 is telling us how obvious and frankly how stupid it is for you to live for this world, to go have a fun time and live up whatever you want to do for this world. He says, verse number 2, he says, of laughter it is mad, and of pleasure what use is it? So he uses these two words, laughter, which sounds like, is this saying that we shouldn't have jokes, we shouldn't laugh? No, it's not saying that. This word for laughter is this idea of like a very small portion, a small hit, if you will, of joy, of pleasure. And then the word for pleasure there is like a big over-the-top pursuit of pleasure. So basically what he's saying here is I've tried little pieces of pleasure, nibbled on the world's pleasure, and I've also eaten full meals of the world's pleasure. And I've tried it, and it's mad, and what use is it? So he tries a couple things. He tries a lot of things in this paragraph here. Ways to try to find pleasure from the world, try to find satisfaction and fulfillment from the world. And I think all of these things here in this paragraph are very real, very present temptations for teenagers. Junior high and high school students, all of these things here are very, very tempting. Look at the first one in verse number 3. Verse number 3, he says, I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine. My heart still guided me with wisdom, how to lay hold on folly till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven in the few days of his life. The beginning there, he says, I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine. I think that is a very present, a very real, a very, frankly, normal thing in high school is for this right here, people trying to cheer themselves with alcohol or drugs or any of those things. And so write it down this way for subpoint A, one of the world's pleasures. We're going to keep it with a bunch of S's tonight. So subpoint A, write this down, substances. Stop fantasizing about the world's pleasures. First, the substances. This is the picture in verse 3 of a sensual pleasure. Sensual, what does that word mean? It means a sensory, feel-good type of pleasure. This makes me feel good. And I love even the way that he words it. He says, how to cheer my body with wine. How to feel good. How to have a good time. He doesn't talk about like drop-dead drunkardness. He says, my heart was still guiding me with wisdom. He's saying I'm not like overly passed out on the floor drunk. But he says, I tried to cheer my body with wine. I tried to mask pain. I tried to alleviate pain. I tried to just feel good with substances to alter my brain chemistry to make me feel better about myself, my problems. Not necessarily an overindulgence, but I want you to think of this type of drinking here as a Band-Aid. Trying to just feel a little bit better. not really have to address my problems. I can feel good this way. Band-aid to life's stresses, a band-aid to life's emptiness. I think this is a very, very real and present temptation for junior high and high school students, is it not? You don't have to be a really cool kid in high school to understand how often it is that people drink. Let's look at the stats this afternoon about drinking. First of all, it's illegal if you're under 21, so that's number one. But I read that 25% of 14 to 15-year-olds have already had their first drink. 25% of 14 to 15-year-olds have already tried it. And 20% of 16 to 17-year-olds drink more than once a month. So this is a normal thing. But then this is a really interesting one, that 90% of underage drinkers are drinking in a binge drinking way. Binge drinking, the definition that I read for that, is over the legal limit to drive. So whatever it is, 0.08 blood alcohol in your blood. 25%, 14 and 15-year-olds have already tried it, and 20% of 16 and 17-year-olds are doing it regularly. It's a monthly thing. More than once a month, I'm doing this. And first of all, I, again, want to just remind you that drinking alcohol at your age is just flat out illegal. So not only are you, doing what he's doing here in verse number 3, but you're also breaking the law. And so that's number one. And maybe, I never drink. I would never do that. Well, this is a pretty normal one in high school too. I was actually very surprised by some of these statistics. But the next one is vaping. That's pretty normal at your school, is it not? Vaping. People do it in the bathrooms, and that's why the bathrooms smell all weird. 13% of junior high and high school students have vaped in the last month, which I thought was a very low number. I don't know how old that is necessarily. And 27% of those do it every single day. Every single day. Not just vaping, but the alcohol or the marijuana stats are insane too. It says 37% of high schoolers have already used marijuana, and nearly 50% of high school graduates have already tried it. Which again, that's illegal too. So let's just state that for your age. I think this is a pretty normal thing in high school. And frankly, I think it's a pretty normal thing in your middle school as well. I love the way that he words it. He says, I search with my heart how to cheer my body with one. Try to just feel better. Mask the pain, alleviate the pain, have a little Band-Aid. Feel good, quick fix. Maybe another word for this that could be helpful for you, that I think of a lot, is the word escapism. Escapism. That's trying to just not think about my problems, and I'm just going to toss it over here and just pretend like it never happened, and I'm just going to try to feel good over here and just try to ignore my problems or my stresses or my emptiness or whatever. And I'm just going to try to Band-Aid the situation. What he says it here is verse 3. He says, till I might cheer my body with wine, or lay hold of folly, till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. Life is short, so just feel good. YOLO, you're only in high school once. You're only in middle school once. Just have fun. That is a very present temptation at every single one of your schools. I don't care how Christian of a school your school is, this is going on 100%. And they're searching for pleasure. But I think what's funny, not funny, but consequential, is that people that do this, they feel worse after than they did before they did it. Right? It's a Band-Aid, and Band-Aids don't work. You get a bullet wound, you try to put a Band-Aid on it, it's just going to get worse. It's just going to get more infected. It's just going to bleed more. You're not fixing anything by this type of solution. It's me too, the guilt too that teenagers feel when they do this kind of stuff. And I don't want my parents to find out. Really would hate it if my small group leader found out. Really don't want Pastor Matt to find out about this. That guilt that you feel is one of those other indications that probably what you're doing is wrong, and ultimately you trying to cheer your body with this, it says, didn't really do anything. What's next? That didn't satisfy me. So look at where he goes after that. Tries the alcohol thing. Verse 4, he says, I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. I bought male and female servants, had slaves that were born in my house. He was a very successful person. And he sought pleasure, satisfaction in his success. Write down that way for subpoint B, success. Stop fantasizing about the world's pleasures, the substances, but also the success. He tried to find satisfaction in what he accomplished, in the work that he did. And he was trying to fulfill himself by doing these great projects, by building houses, by planting vineyards, by making gardens and parks and planting trees, planting all kinds of fruit trees. Is this sinful? No. But it says what he was trying to do was he was trying to search for fulfillment and satisfaction in what he did, in his success. He built his empire for his own name, for his own sake, to make himself feel good. And ultimately, you will understand in this world that success never satisfies. You be as successful as you want. You could reach the top of the mountain, and there's something about it. Oh, that wasn't it. Oh, that didn't fulfill me. Oh, that didn't satisfy me. It's funny how you see this anytime a team wins a championship. Happened just this last year when the Rams won the Super Bowl. At their parade, the chant the whole time was, run it back, run it back. Because I had just won, there's a trophy, we just beat everyone, we just won the Super Bowl. And the first thing that they do is say, let's do it again. Why? Because it didn't satisfy. It didn't fulfill. You got one, I want another. And if they win another, they'll say, I want another and another and another. Success never satisfies. That's the first thing that these athletes say when they win a Super Bowl and win a championship, anything like that. I want to do it again. If success really satisfied, no one would say that. Right? If it fulfilled you, you don't need to do it again. I want you to think about the satisfaction that you try to find in the things that you do. Last week, we talked about school. Last week, we talked about grades. Last week, we talked about what college you're going to go to so that you can throw it on your resume one day or get a license plate frame and put it on the back of your car and say, oh, I'm an alumni of this school. Oh, it's a big deal. We said that was vanity. Talking about school. But I know many of you trying to find satisfaction in the other things that you do. Maybe something like this right here. Something like sports. Trying to find satisfaction and fulfillment because I am going to be such a good athlete. I'm going to put all my time, all my attention into my sport. And man, I'm going to feel good and be successful. And I'm going to get this scholarship or I'm going to do this or that. And I'm going to be famous. I'm going to win a Super Bowl. Whatever the case may be. Trying to find satisfaction in your success. Everyone knows I played golf in high school. I spent hours and hours and hours in my backyard hitting balls into a net over and over and over and over again. I spent hours every single week of my life. And you know what? It paid off. Nothing. I got a couple cool pictures, a couple cool screenshots saved on my computer of a couple cool things that I did and won and tournaments I, did well in. And professional golfers that I played in tournaments with that are literally famous now. It's like, oh, I played again. Nothing. Who cares? No one cares. I know you don't care that I played varsity golf. I know that's for sure. No one cares. In 10 years, no one is going to care what sport you played. And no one's going to care how good you were at your sport. No one's going to care how much practice you put into your sport. No one's going to care. Oh, you might get a scholarship? Great. I remember one of the schools I was talking to get a scholarship. They're like, yeah, if you make the team, we're going to take $500 off your tuition. What? Like all these hours in the backyard and you're going to give me $1,000. It was like, I think it was $1,000 every semester. And it was like, cool. Like, again, that's a lot of money. Sure, in one sense, but in another sense, college is so expensive. That is a tiny little fraction for the hours and hours and hours I put into something like this. What's the payoff? What's the payoff? If the Rams win the Super Bowl and say, I just want to do it again, it doesn't even pay off for them is what they're saying. Stop trying to think that the success that you have in this life, whether it's athletics, whether it's school, whether it's your job, whether it's all these projects that he does, that will bring you any sort of fulfillment. I want you to think right now, the most successful people on the planet run these companies, win these championships, actors in these movies. They are the most depressed people on the planet, straight up. The most depressing place in the planet is Hollywood, is LA, is New York City. People are depressed. Why? Because success leaves you feeling empty if that is your God, if that is what you're trying to find your satisfaction and fulfillment with. It's a facade. It's a mirage. It's fake, is what Solomon is telling us here. All this success, all these things that he did, it brought him a lot. Look at verse 7. He says, I bought male and female servants and had slaves who were born in my house. I had great possessions and herds and flocks more than any who had gone before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold, all the treasures of kings and provinces. I've got so much stuff. That is something that the world will try to throw in your face. Get as much stuff as possible, and that will fill you up. Write it down for subpoint C. Stuff. Stop fantasizing about the world's pleasures. Substances, success, stuff. He had so much money. One of the biggest lies in the world is the more stuff you have, the more satisfied you'll be. That is the exact opposite of what stuff does. Stuff is the least satisfying stuff on the planet. The more you have, the more empty you feel. Look at him. He had power too. He had all these slaves that were reporting to him. Oh, if you're powerful, if you've got a lot of money, if you're some CEO, it's going to feel good. No, it's not going to feel good. Never going to be satisfied with it. Solomon had unlimited wealth. He had more money than anyone else, it says. Surpassed all who were before him in Jerusalem. And this is what he says. We'll get to it later on in chapter 5. Ecclesiastes 5, verse 10 and 15. Listen to this. He says, he who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This is also vanity. And as he came from his mother's womb, he shall go again, naked as he came, and he shall take nothing for his toil that he may carry away in his hand. When you die, you can't take any money with you. The queen just died. She's one of the most rich people on the face of the planet. And you know what she has now? Absolutely nothing. Nothing. Not a dollar, not a pound, not a euro to her name. She's got nothing. She's dead in a casket. She's met her maker. She's got nothing to show for it. All the money, all the success, all the fame, whatever. What is it going to do you in the end? Because you're going to end up in a casket just like the richest person on the planet, just like the poorest person on the planet. He who loves money will not be satisfied, nor he who loves his wealth with his income. It's vanity. You can't take anything with you. I told you we're going to use the analogy a million times throughout Ecclesiastes, but it's like living your life for monopoly money. It's something that expires. It's something that will ultimately have no value one day. When you're done with the game, it's just a piece of paper. Why would you live your whole life for something as temporary as monopoly money? That's what we are doing when we live our lives for stuff, for money. Gathering as much silver and gold, all the treasures of kings and provinces, possessions and herds and flocks more than any who had gone before him in Jerusalem. He tried it. He had everything, and he says it was nothing. Again, going back to it, the richest people in the world are the most depressed people in the world. Why do you think that is? Because money does satisfy or because it doesn't? Again, it's so tough for us because you live here in one of the richest counties in the country, in the world. We've got so much stuff around us, so much money around us. Frankly, of all people, you should know that money doesn't actually fill you up or satisfy you. The nicer your car that you drive to school, the more stuff that you have, the nicer your clothes are, the how expensive your, whatever shoes are. Do those really matter? Like the more shoes you have, the nicer the shoes you have, does that make you want to have less shoes? Because I got nice ones. Oh, I have a really nice house or car, whatever the case may be. It doesn't satisfy. He tries that. Look at the last one. I think this one is a very, very present and real teenager temptation here. Look at the end of verse 8. He says, I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delights of the sons of man. What is a concubine? A concubine is someone that is literally owned by the king to have sex with him. That's intense. It is a very real, a very present temptation for junior high and high school students to feel that this right here, subpoint D, that sex will bring you pleasure. Solomon had everything. It says he has many concubines. He tried to fulfill his desires, sexual desires, and it leads him to nothing. Have whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. And he said it was a waste. Didn't fill him up. I want you to read here with me 1 Kings chapter 11. 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 1 through 3, that describes Solomon's love life. A lot of issues. 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 1, it says, Now King Solomon loved many foreign women, along with the daughter of Pharaoh, Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonian, and the Hittite women, from the nations concerning which the Lord had said to the people of Israel, You shall not enter into marriage with them, neither shall you, for surely they will turn away your hearts after their gods. But Solomon, he clung to these in love, and he had 700 wives who were princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned his heart away. The lie of lust is that just a little bit more, just a little fulfillment. Could only have this right now, instant gratification, that will feel good. And if I could only have that, or be with that person, have that relationship, man, then that would be pretty good. Solomon had 700 wives, 300 concubines, and he says not even that was enough. Not even that filled him up. Instant gratification anytime he wanted, and he was not satisfied with it. Think about it. What is pornography? It's instant satisfaction. It's a promise of instant satisfaction. And it's a lie of instant satisfaction. And the stats on this are just baffling. And I know I've used this before, but again, I don't know. I think this sounds pretty accurate here. It said 90% of teens have accessed porn. 64% use it weekly. 50% were exposed before they were 13. And this is the craziest one, that porn websites account for more activity than Amazon, Netflix, and Twitter combined. That is wild. Talk about sex here. Very common in high school. 55% of high schoolers who graduate have already had it. And frankly, I think that number is pretty low. I think it's higher than that. I don't have a stat to back it up, but that seems low to me. You as a teenager are battling this temptation. Look at 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. 1 Thess chapter 4, verse 3. It says, For this is the will of God, your sanctification, that you abstain from sexual immorality. So the thing is, your hormones don't help. The stage of life that you're in doesn't help. I understand that. But it's no excuse to just give in. It's no excuse to just live it up and do what the rest of the world does. Because all you're doing is hurting yourself. All you're doing is coming up empty. And if Solomon, who had this, said it wasn't enough, then whatever you have is not enough either. It's a waste, is what he says. Solomon, he tried to fill himself up with all of these things here. Substances, success, stuff, and sex. And he says it was all worthless. Look at verse 9 here with me. He says, I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. With my wisdom, it remained with me. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil. And this was my reward for all my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, all of it was vanity. All of it was a striving after the wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. I tried it all and said, even that, it wasn't enough. I want you to write it down this way for point number 2. Foresee the consequences of unrestrained worldly pleasure. Foresee the consequences of unrestrained worldly pleasure. foresee the consequences of unrestrained worldly pleasure. Solomon, unrestrained, whatever he wanted, verse 10 says, kept his heart from no pleasure, and he said it was a waste. Ultimately, what is the consequence for unrestrained worldly pleasure? We'll get to it here in a second. Obviously, there's punishment from God if that's the way you live your life. But also, Solomon here tells us that the consequence is nothing. Emptiness, brokenness, no real satisfaction. When you're done writing that down, I'd love for you to turn over to 1 John chapter 3. Keep your bookmark in Ecclesiastes 2 because we'll be back. But 1 John chapter 2. 1 John chapter 2, verse 15 to 17 with me. 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 to 17. To live your life for the world will leave you feeling empty, broken, helpless, and have accomplished and satisfied and fulfilled and scratched no itch. No satisfaction. 1 John chapter 2. Look at verse 15 to 17 with me. It says, 1 John 2:15 says, do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, desires of the flesh, desires of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world. Here's the consequence. And the world is passing away along with its desires, but whoever does the will of God abides forever. See these temptations that you wrote down? Point number 1. They're very present. They're right at your doorstep every day when you go to school, when you go online. If you are going to live a life that glorifies God, you need to stop loving the world. Stop saying, I want what the world has. I'm going to pursue what the world pursues because I know the consequence. I know the end of the movie. I know what happens if I do. It's a warning here. See, a Christian could be tempted, obviously, with worldly pleasure and worldly sin, but they need to stop thinking that whatever that is attractive. You think about fishing. When you throw a bait on a hook, no fish would ever bite the bait on the hook if they saw and understood and pondered the hook on the other side of the bait. They bite it because they just see the bait. They don't see the hook on the other side, the danger that's on the other side. They don't see the end of the movie, that they're being eaten for dinner. It's a waste. There's giant consequences. Trouble, pain, guilt, emptiness, irreversible damage. I was talking with someone yesterday who works in a very worldly setting, a very secular setting. They were telling me that, one, it's a great mission field to be amidst just the world. But she said that being around these people that get to do whatever they want, whenever they want, unrestrained, pleasure and satisfaction, she was just talking about how insanely broken, how much more broken these people are that pursue these kinds of things are than anyone else she's ever met. Why? Unrestrained, worldly pleasure leaves you empty and broken and nothing. James 4:4 says, you adulterous people, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world then makes himself an enemy of God. Notice the consequences here. I love the world. I make myself an enemy of God. There are grave consequences to this right here. Not just is your life a waste and you're going to be empty and broken, but also the consequences are grave. You are an enemy of God, it says. Yet what's so interesting about this text here is that when we read this and all of the stuff that Solomon does, I'm sure there are people in this room that think, that looks kind of good though. Why are you tempted with the things that Solomon lives for here? Why are you tempted? Because you don't believe him. You don't believe him. Why would you go home and go after these pleasures if you truly believed him, that it was nothing and worthless? I don't think any of us like to waste anything. Like, you don't like to waste anything, waste money, waste time. When you go after this, it's a waste, and what you're doing is you're not believing what God's word says. looks good from the outside. I don't know. I mean, everyone else gets to do it. Understand that the momentary pleasure, it leads to consequence right away. Pastor Elliott, he turned to this passage this weekend, but I thought it was so helpful and so applicable here to Ecclesiastes 2, Hebrews chapter 12. Hebrews 12, verse 16 through 17, gives this example of Esau. It says, the hopes that none of you are sexually immoral or unholy like Esau, who sold his birthright for a single meal. For you know that afterward, when he desired to inherit the blessing, he was rejected, for he found no chance to repent, even though he sought it with tears. He traded everything, something so valuable as his birthright, his inheritance, all the blessing that was going to come to him, for being the son of his dad, and he traded it all for a single meal. A single meal. His whole life for a meal. It's this picture of sin. Trading something so big and valuable for something so momentary. Something that when you have a good meal, you got to have another one in a couple hours. It doesn't satisfy. Man, it sounds like God is a Debbie Downer. It sounds like God doesn't care about me. It sounds like doesn't want me to have good things or enjoyment in life. If that's what you think, you're dead wrong. You're dead wrong. Psalm 84:11 says, "The Lord God is a sun and a shield. The Lord bestows favor and honor. No good thing does he withhold for those who walk uprightly." God is not saying don't go after the world, because really the world has stuff that fills you up. He's doing it for your own good. Even some of these gifts here, God has given to us, like success. Can a Christian have success? Yes, they can. But when success is not their God, when God is their God, sometimes he lets them be successful. He lets them make money. These things, God is not just withholding them because he wants you to have a terrible life. He says, no good thing does he withhold from those who walk uprightly. God ultimately has what is good. God is good. And it doesn't really show up in our text here, but it obviously shows up in the New Testament of what is the alternative here. If you just said that the world is empty and broken and I shouldn't live for the world, what should I do instead? I think the obvious answer, the Sunday school answer, is very obvious. Jesus, right? Jesus, to find satisfaction and fulfillment in him and not the world, that's the solution. So write it down this way for point number 3. It's more of a question and an answer, but point number 3, write it down this way. What's the alternative? To find fulfillment in Christ alone. What's the alternative? To find fulfillment in Christ alone. The gospel provides hope for you who is seeking fulfillment and satisfaction. He says you don't have to go to the world. You don't have to experience the world's pleasures and feel empty and broken and guilty and sinful and dirty like the rest of the world. There's something so much better for you. This is not New Testament. You can write down Jeremiah 2. Jeremiah 2:13. It says, "For my people have committed 2 evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and they've hewed out for themselves broken cisterns that can hold no water." What he's saying here is that trying to be satisfied with the world will leave you broken, but you go to the fountain of living water. Just take a look at this picture. Just the satisfaction that a broken cistern will give you versus a nice, full, cold, icy glass of ice water. When you are thirsty, a broken, muddy cistern that holds no water, it's just going to come right out of your hands. It's not going to fill you up. It's not going to satisfy you. It's not going to quench your thirst. Christ has so much better. Solomon warns us here of the fakeness of the world's pleasures. Jesus says that he's where it's at. He's got what we need. You can write down John 6:35. It says, Jesus said, "I'm the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger. Whoever believes in me shall never thirst again." Do you believe that? I want you to think right now about this text. John 6:35. Do you believe Jesus? Or is Jesus a liar? to go and to live your life for the world, what you're saying here is, Jesus, you don't know what you're talking about. You're wrong. Live like the bread of life has what you need. One of my favorite quotes is this one from C.S. Lewis. We'll close with this. He says, if we find ourselves with the desire that nothing in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that we were made for another world. I think that is so profound. If you try to be filled up by this world and you cannot be filled by this world, then that must mean you were made for another world that has what you need, that will fill you up in the ways that the world doesn't. Solomon tried it and learned the hard way. My hope and my prayer for you is that you don't learn the hard way, that you learn the easy way by just reading a text like this, listening to a sermon like this, and getting real about what you're living for, putting off the old and putting on the new. Don't learn the hard way. Go to the bread of life. Let's go to God, the bread of life, right now in prayer. God, we just thank you for just this important reminder for us this evening that the world does not have what we need. The pleasures of the world are fleeting, are empty, are broken, God, but you have everything. You are the bread of life. Whoever comes to you will never hunger, never thirst. Again, I pray for every student in this room that right now does not believe that right there. God, help them believe. Help them see what they're living for is empty, and they keep going down that path. They will suffer emptiness, brokenness, and ultimately the consequence of their sin. Eternity in hell for it, God. And I pray for every student in this room to experience the bread of life, not go after the world, but they would be protected by a text like this from Ecclesiastes, written thousands of years ago, that it speaks to us right now in this room, in our situations, in our junior highs, in our high schools, to protect us from sin, to point us in the right direction. God, thank you for this text. Pray now for a great small groups as we talk about how this applies to our life. Pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.